Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. What we're going to do in the next 45 minutes to an hour is we'll speak about real estate and short-term rentals. I think that we have a very interesting and insightful session here. So my name is Yoav Turel, and I'm also known by the name Yoey, by the way. I'm the managing director of Guesty here in APAC. And it's really great kind of to be here with an impressive kind of group of panelists, each one expert in his field. Well, I'll introduce more and we'll speak, and they will speak each one on their kind of organization, but I'll just kind of start with a short intro of Daryl Smith, head of strategic partnership at MadeComfy. MadeComfy is a fascinating company. It's Australia's fastest growing property management and hospitality company specialized in short-term rentals. We kind of always say we love speaking with the MadeComfys. We're learning a lot of them, and it's great to have you here, Daryl. So thank you. We have Josh Simmons from MRI. Is a strategic industry principal. MRI Software is a leading provider of real estate and investment management software to real estate owners, investors, and operators. Quite advanced tools they have, and Josh will kind of touch base on kind of the insights that they see at their side. And last but not least, we have Barry Little, the founder of Ozway Realty, and correct me if I'm wrong, quite unique real estate organization. It's Australia's first real estate collaborative membership organization. And, I would love to ask you later on about it. But thank you very much for joining us. The way that it's going to go in the next few minutes, I'll do a very short intro so we can pretty much quickly move to the main part, which is a few presentations led by each one of the panelists, followed by a panel discussion that we'll have, and we will leave enough time at the end to questions and answers. For those of you, just to kick things off and very quickly, just about kind of Guesty, for those of you who are not familiar, we basically we were built with the understanding that property managers and property management companies have a ton of tasks to accomplish on a daily basis, whether it's staff management, issuing reports to homeowners, handling guest checking, checkouts. What we try to do, we try via our software to provide solutions that help property manager to save valuable time, be much more efficient, save on their operational costs, so they can focus on growing their business. In a nutshell, we are that, or try to be that one-stop shop where you can connect with the major OTAs with a variety of third-party partners that provide solutions that are relevant to the property managers, and basically kind of allow one place that you can manage everything that you need for your short-term rental business. We have a few offices worldwide. We usually work with clients that has between 100 to thousands of properties. We're 1 year old here in Sydney. We have an office. We're broadcasting to you now from Surrey Hills. We have a team of 7 here on the ground. We work with close to 100 local clients and all type of sizes. We work very closely with our OTA friends here, as well as with Astra, the Australian Short-Term Rentals and Accommodation Association. We work with them very closely on everything that has to do on knowledge, standardization, regulation, etc. So if you're around, you're more than welcome to come and say hello, as we are in Surrey Hills. That's the best coffee in, I think, in Australia, even better than Melbourne, some would say. So please come over. Look, now, the main reason why we're running this event today or under this topic is actually mainly kind of to learn from the panelists and to learn from your questions. We see, I'll speak about few trends that we see with our short-term rental lens, and we think that relates and impact the real estate sector. But we keep hearing in the last couple of months, we're getting calls, we're being approached by real estate agents that want to understand better the short-term rental world. How does it work in terms of the operation, comparing the yield between long-term to short-term, and that's basically kind of what brought us here. We do also see a few strong kind of trends that emerged in the last kind of few months, 3 to 6 months. The main, or the keyword, the main highlight that we have, especially from this COVID era, is flexibility. Flexibility, the notion of having flexibility in booking, in deciding when to book, the last minute, the length of stay, flexibility in cancellation. We've seen this trend growing before COVID, and we can definitely say that COVID accelerated it. One of the kind of among the things that we've seen, you can kind of read on the slide, we've seen different personas of guests, tenants emerging from this period of time. And with that, we've seen some strong patterns that related to the extended stays, to contact-free stays, everything that has to do with last minute booking, last minute cancellation, obviously kind of the need for a high level of cleaning, outdoor space, isolated space, and obviously kind of the focus, the growth of domestic travel. Just kind of to speak specifically on kind of on these few trends. So first of all, the shift of stays from what we used to traditionally before Corona, you know, that how everybody kind of refers to it as BC, before Corona. So BC, we used to see between 4 to 5 days on average across our clients globally. And now we see kind of a shift for 14, 30 days. We have clients, including I've seen here a few kind of the attendees that have now 3 months even and longer period of time for their short, or what used to be their short-term properties. We basically kind of see increase in the flexibility. So the increase in cancellation is related to the flexibility. Basically kind of the main notion is the guests today, they crave for flexibility, they want it, they hate the hassle of long-term commitment, they want to work from anywhere. You know, we can see it in our organization where globally we have people that can now work from other places, and they're taking advantage of it where they can. And as I said, this notion of flexibility was even before the COVID. It's the easiest in terms of booking kind of places. It's the easy notion of doing things. It's like how we consume content these days. All right, the kind of the easiness of Netflix. This notion of I can decide when, where, I don't want commitment. This is something that we see very strong also in the short-term rental space. So flexibility one. Second thing that we see is that the average nightly rate, we see that actually is on the rise. We basically kind of see that even though the travelers are booking longer stays, which typically is actually should yield less revenue per night. We're actually seeing that the ANR in Australia is on the rise. When we look on the average nightly rate for properties across Australia, for the first time we're seeing higher than those in 2019. So this period of time compared to 2019, the average nightly rate is actually kind of higher. We see 12% increase in August compared to this time last year, growing from around $107 per night on average to $120. I'm talking kind of Aussie dollars. This means that real estate professionals who get into short-term rentals can have basically an opportunity to earn a much higher profit potential. And the last element that in terms of the trends you see is the build to rent, the BTR boom globally, and the impact also on Australia. So Australia is just now beginning to grow the build to rent industry, also known as the Australia third housing option. We're seeing, or the world is seeing, growth and success in established markets like US and the UK. You can see kind of the numbers. Biggest build to rent market is the US, generate more than $160 billion in revenue per year, and has more than 500,000 multifamily related companies in this sector. We're talking about $300 billion worth of Australian residents could be owned by super funds and other institutional investors over the next couple of decades if the sector evolves like the US market, so we're talking now post-corona time. You can see it also from different angles, why kind of it's quite a lucrative model from the economy side, for example, low interest rate environment, from the developer side that offers high cash flow, low risk, tax reforms, from the tenants kind of a side that basically it's suiting better their lifestyle preference, it's increase the security, the amenities, etc. Specifically kind of here in Australia, as I mentioned, also known as the third housing option, but it's the idea of getting a fully furnished rentals, hotel-like in terms of their aesthetics. There is flexibility of renting from one end and the security of ownership from the other end. There was recently published that New South Wales 50% discount on land taxes for built-to-rent properties, and you can see kind of the current data and the projections, and it's very much sits well with the global trend of no ownership or knowership, that people are not kind of, especially kind of the young guys, they are not kind of quick, eager to actually own a place, and they prefer that control and flexibility to move from one place to another. So these kind of main three things that we see at our end, the notion of flexibility. Flexibility also, I should have mentioned it also because that's what we hear from clients, is the flexibility to move from long-term to mid-term to short-term. So also from the client side. So the notion of flexibility, the increase in the average nightly rate, the build to rent trend for the years to come, that's where we see the meeting point, the linkage with the real estate sector. So to summarize, flexibility, build to rent trend, and basically the extended stays and the opportunity for real estate professionals. But that's the Guesty thoughts and point of view. And now let's start with the experts in their field to understand and learn more kind of about it. So we will start with Daryl Smith, Head of Strategic Partnership from MadeComfy, and I'll let you, Daryl, kind of to speak more about you and about kind of your insights.
Thanks very much, Yoav. Great to be here today, and thanks again to Guesty for the invitation and for being able to present today. What I wanted to do today is just run through with everyone and give you a bit of an insider's guide to short-term management from a property management company's perspective. Plus, give everyone a bit of insight if you're considering starting your own short-term rental business or transitioning from long-term rental into the short-term rental space. Just really give you some advice and some guidance on the key areas that we've found be challenging over the last 5 years that we've been in operation, and also give you a bit of insight on the operations and the management side as you try and scale your business. So firstly, just a little bit about MadeComfy. Yoav obviously mentioned who we are, what we do, but ultimately MadeComfy is Australia's first professional short-term rental management company for professionals. So people who are really looking to manage and run professional short-term rental businesses or as hosts. MadeComfy was established just over 5 years ago, our head office being based in Sydney, Australia, and we have offices and satellite locations in Melbourne, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, and Canberra. And we have approximately up to 100 people working in the business at any one time. So the first area I wanted to share with you guys, especially for those who are not too afraid or just getting into short-term rentals, is some of the key differences between long-term and short-term rental management. So from a long-term rentals perspective, there are a few pros and a few cons in that sector. Long-term rentals is obviously an established model, so been around a long time, a lot of systems, processes, and people generally understand how to manage and what the industry is all about. Obviously, there are fixed lease agreements that tenants will be signing. So you've got a lot of legislation behind that side. And typically you're signing anything between a 6 or a 12-month commitment, which means that there's a guaranteed income each week for the landlord or the owner of those properties. On the negative side, there are limited advertising channels. So typically you're looking at domain and realestate.com as being the two key or major channels where properties would be advertised, and there's no real flexibility for owners to actually use those properties or have it as an asset that you can flick between using it yourself or renting it out. Potentially you may also be earning a lower rental income or a lower rental yield, especially in cities like Sydney, where you've got a very high acquisition or purchase price and a considerably lower rental income that you get on the long-term market. You also have the risk of having a non-caring tenant. So it's not just on the short-term side, but also on the long-term side. You could have a tenant that's in a rental arrears, doesn't look after the property, and you could end up with your property being damaged or not looked after for a fixed period of 12 months where you don't have access to actually get into the property or visibility of what's going on in that property. From a short-term rental perspective, we obviously have multiple advertising channels, which means you've got a lot more visibility and a lot more choice for people to find and book your property. Owners' flexibility to use the property themselves. So we look after both investors who rent the property 365 days a year and try and maximize the return. But we also look after what we call lifestyle choice. So people who are downsizers, people who want to get access for business trips a couple of times a year, or want flexibility to simply use the property themselves during the course of the year and not have a tenant all year round. Potentially, you also be earning a higher rental return. And as Yoav mentioned, just giving that flexibility, you can obviously charge higher rates to give people the flexibility to use those properties for short and mid-term stays. Some of the cons, obviously, there's a bit of uncertainty around bookings. Different areas perform with different occupancy rates, which means you don't have a guaranteed week-to-week income. So you need to have a bit of a cash flow buffer to make sure that you're not week-to-week in paying your mortgages or very, very tight on your repayments. Normally, your accommodation ranges between a single night up to 90 nights, 1 month to 3 months as a general short and midterm stay. And it's also very service intensive. So it's not as easy as just getting a tenant in and it's set and forget for the next 12 months. You do need to have a lot more visibility and obviously a lot more involvement with the property on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. The final part of that is there's a bit of investment to get started. So you obviously need to invest in furnishing, styling, and getting all the home essential items in the property to have a high performance or a good quality professional short-term rental. So over the years, we've identified 3 key pillars or areas that you need to really drill down and focus on to have a successful short-term rental. The first one being location and property type. The next one being having an X factor or something that's a real standout on your property. And then the third pillar being the pricing. So the first one I'll just jump into is location. Key things to look for with location is obviously you want to have areas that are in high demand for both business and leisure travelers. So it's not all about overseas tourism and it's not all about corporate travel, but you want to have a good balance between the two. You need to obviously be close to public transport, local attractions, convention centers, things that really drive the traffic to your property. And you also want to have balance between seasonality. So not just a Bondi property that's focusing on summer, but something that's winter and summer is going to generate a high demand for guests. Then you need to look at the actual performance side and making sure there's a large delta between the short-term and the long-term rental yields. So those areas that might not be that great in performance on long-term might be really good for short-term with a higher rental returns. The last part for any investor, obviously you want to balance your capital growth with that asset and match that with the higher rental yield. So getting a property that performs with really good cash flow and making sure that it's growing capital-wise, not just having a higher rental yield and no growth over time of the asset. The next one is the property type. So key things you need to consider there is having the right amount of properties across your portfolio of different sizes. So you don't want to just jump in and have 100 studios or 1-bedroom apartments all in the inner city. You want to make sure that you've got a balanced portfolio of different size properties and different types of properties across different areas to again attract as many travelers and as many bookers and guests as possible. So as an example there, a 1- and 2-bedroom apartments in the inner city may perform really well because of business travelers and convention centers, where when you move out to areas like the northern beaches of Sydney, it may be 3- and 4-bedroom homes that are more attractive for holiday rentals, home renovators, and people looking for bigger properties and for longer stays. The next pillar is the X factor. So here you need to be really mindful of investing time and money in setting up the property correctly. So things like the furnishing, get it professionally furnished. Don't cut corners and get cheap furniture, which obviously the guests will notice straight away. The styling, getting professional photography done, not just on an iPhone or a friend of a friend to get some pictures to create your listing. Copywriting, having a really professional looking and well-detailed listing. All of those items lead to 5-star reviews. So with that X factor property, you need to consider obviously the booker's journey. There's a number of different things that they will be looking at. So number one, the location. A desirable location will obviously attract more people to your listing. The budget range, make sure you're always within the range that people are searching in terms of their affordable budget. Then the actual pictures need to be really X factor and stand out so that people click on your booking. Once they're into the booking, naturally you need good copywriting and also 5-star reviews to make sure that they're looking at what your peers have said. That will then lead them towards checkout and the actual booking of the property. And there you need to make sure it's correctly priced. So not just copying what your neighbors have done, but actually having a pricing strategy and making sure that your property is correctly priced based on the demand and the supply. The final pillar there is the actual pricing. So having dynamic pricing and revenue optimization and having that pricing change on a daily basis is really important. So there, having a pricing and revenue team would definitely help with ensuring that your pricing is right. Most importantly, what we've seen is obviously the operational challenges. So there's 6 key areas that we've noticed that are key for operations. The things you need to consider if you're starting up your own short-term rental business would be 24/7 cover and after-hours services for guests. So you need to make sure that the guests are always looked after. That's both an onshore team, but also having an offshore team to capture those bookings in other time zones. So you may find people in the US and EU that are searching overnight when most of the people in Australia are asleep. So having an offshore team to support you can be really beneficial. Guest communication, that's a really important area as well, considering the different response times. Short term, you need to be able to respond same day and address things like maintenance issues, housekeeping issues, whereas a long-term tenant, you typically have up to a week to get items fixed, get access to property. So just really managing those guest expectations is vital. Here, you need to consider as well as you scale, having manual versus automated guest communication. So there, having a good property management system or having a good communication system will allow you to do that. Thirdly, set up the property and access to building. Here, our recommendation is definitely keep it simple and make sure that it's safe, especially during COVID. You want to make sure that the buildings are safe for your guests. And there, things like whether it's a strata building or a freestanding home will determine the access. We highly recommend, if possible, going keyless. That will save you a lot of time, a lot of money on lost keys, key management apps, other tools that you may need to manage your keys. And then obviously guest lockouts and after hours can be a challenge if you're not using a keyless or a digital system. The third one is pricing. So I mentioned earlier having a pricing and revenue team or an analytics team so that you're not just pricing the same as everybody else and you're capturing that low-hanging fruit, but also optimizing when you're the last remaining property over an event that you can maximize and surge your pricing. The fifth one would be scheduling of housekeeping, cleaning, and operations. And there, as Yoav mentioned, that's a really important area where a good PMS system or a good channel management system can actually really help you to manage the housekeeping, manage the cleaning, manage your ops people getting in and out of the property. Critical for when you're scaling. So if you've got just 5 properties, that can be quite easy to clean in a single day. But when you've got 100 checkouts at 10 a.m. and you need to have all of those cleaned and ready for 3 p.m. the same day for your next guests, that's where you really need to make sure your operations and your scheduling systems are all aligned and everything is automated. So one thing that people generally forget is the logistics around linen and towels. How do you get all the fresh linen to those properties? How do you get in and out between that 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. period and make sure it's still COVID safe and well cleaned for the guests? So our recommendation there is do your research, make sure you've got a good channel management system, a good PMS system that can pull everything together and keep it and manage it all from one central location. So last point I wanted to just run through really quickly is common short-term rental management myths. So these are a lot of the things that we've heard our clients say over the years, and I thought I'd just give you a bit of the truths behind those. So first one, it's easy to manage myself. This is definitely not true. And as you can imagine, property managers need to consider a number of different areas, things like having additional staff, systems, processes, infrastructure as you scale to maintain the quality experience for the guests, but also maintaining the professionalism of the experience. The next one is I can double my revenue overnight. There's a very big misconception here that you simply flick from a long-term rental to a short-term rental. As soon as the listing goes live, the money just starts rolling in. A lot of people don't consider what we call the ramp-up period. So generally your first month to 2 months where you have no reviews, it's a fresh listing. It obviously takes a bit of time to get traction. So people can't expect to be up and running with super premium prices within your first couple of days. You do need time to gradually increase that pricing and generate reviews. Getting started is quick. Again, this is definitely not the truth. You need to invest in furnishing, styling, professional photography, getting your home essential items all in there, and then making sure that you've created a professional listing before you just dive into taking bookings. So that's really important, is take your time and don't just rush through things. The fourth one, no one is traveling due to COVID. I think as Yoav really highlighted earlier, there's a number of reasons why people are still traveling. We're seeing a high demand in the MadeComfy properties for work from home, young professionals looking for flexible leases and just not wanting to commit for a 12-month unfurnished property, frontline workers, medical workers, relocation agents, expats, a lot of home renovations happening right now during COVID, and then obviously the SMEs and small businesses who still have to travel in order to generate an income. Those people are still definitely traveling, definitely booking short-term and mid-term rental properties. The last two are kind of combined. There is a notion that short-term rentals result in high wear and tear on the property. Now, again, having the property professionally cleaned on a weekly basis, having maintenance teams going through the property every couple of weeks, we definitely get visibility of those properties. And that allows us to obviously keep on top of any things like mold or any issues that are happening in the property. And you can find, in fact, after 12 months that the property is probably going to be in better condition than potentially if it was with a long-term tenant where not professionally cleaning the property. Airbnb attracts party houses. Again, this is another area where when you're building your business, you need to make sure you have systems and processes in place for things like ID verification, guest screening. We don't allow last-minute bookings, strict house rules. And then there's other software and technology out there that allows you to monitor noise, CO2 levels in properties, etc. Doors opening and closing. That technology can really help you just keep control on what's happening in those properties. So the last point I wanted to raise was just for anyone considering doing short-term rentals as a business or really diversifying your long-term rental role. Obviously, MadeComfy's been in the industry for a number of years, and we're more than happy if anyone wanted to reach out to us, if you have any questions, or if there's any areas where you'd like a bit more guidance, more than happy to help anyone. And my email address is on the last slide here. All right, thanks very much. I'll jump back to Yoav.
How cool is the mouse cursor? Eh? Very cool. No, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. There are questions from the audience, but we'll keep them to later on. Thank you very much. And now we are over to Barry to present yourself, present your organization, and the insight that you bring in. So we'll stop share and we'll give you the ability to share.
Thanks for the introduction, Yoav. And that was really great content, Daryl, that you were sharing there, and some really good tips for people that are looking to get into the space. Today I'm just going to share with you from a typical sort of traditional residential sales and rentals point of view, and how we work with short-term partners like MadeComfy. I'll give you a bit of a background of Ozway first of all. And myself, I started in real estate in 1997, so I've been around for a little while now. And I also set up Australia's first membership site for real estate agents in 2007. After doing that for some years, what I found I really wanted to do was create a platform for real estate agents to operate their organizations without having the sort of headaches of all the back-end support services and requiring so many people on the team to manage. So I founded Ozway in 2013, and pretty short after founding the company, I became the first member on the platform, actually, because I discovered it was quite new for the industry. Not many agents had heard about it, so I set up my own agency to be a member of the Ozway organization. And after maybe about 6 months or so, I had a property sale down in the Connaught building, for those of you know, in Hyde Park, just off Hyde Park in Sydney. And I thought that the purchaser of that property was he was working on the United Nations in Montreal, and he's originally from Australia, from Maroubra area. And he asked me if I could rent it out for him. And after we sold it to them, and I said, yeah, look, we can rent it out. But I said, look, I am curious to see if this sort of property could get a better yield in a with the short term marketplace. So I started Googling, and I think this was definitely before Airbnb was around. I'm not sure when Airbnb came out, but I don't recall it being in Australia at that time. And I came across a company when I was Googling it, and had a conversation with them, and we started building a relationship up. Turned out they could actually get a much better return, like on the long-term rental side. It would have been around $750 a week, and they were getting about $1,000 a week for the client with quite long time stays. So it worked out to be a better arrangement for the client. Now, back in those days, I just sort of found this other company and handed on the business, but it didn't really work for our company because we had something go off our balance sheet and off our business. So I'm going to touch on this a little bit more as I go through the presentation. I just wanted to share how I got into and how I discovered short-term rental, and how I could see we could find a synergy for it working for our landlords and our clients and our customers, so that it works for them, it's working for us, and it also works for the short-term management partner as well. Ozway is an aggregation platform, like a utility service. So we provide the back-end support services for real estate agents to operate their business. Currently, there's 11 agencies around New South Wales using the platform, and we partner with residential agents. We've settled over $750 million in properties over this time. And I also founded Agents Help Homeless, which is an initiative in September 2018, where I partnered with Wesley Mission we're based in Surrey Hills as well, and I noticed that there seems to be more and more people on the streets, and after looking into it a little bit further, I thought, this is getting worse, not better. And if I don't start looking into this, who is going to do it? And I realized there's a whole beautiful network of people out there who are taking care of the homeless. And anyway, I think there's a real need for affordable housing, and I'm quite excited about this built to rent industry and what that could provide in the space of creating more homes and more opportunities for people too in that space. That's just a little bit about me. I'll start just by sharing, I guess, looking at what's possible and what's available. So when it comes to, from a long-term rentals point of view, and how we can integrate with short-term rentals, and I see it's such a great possibility for us to coexist and work well together. Firstly, I see that the higher returns for the landlords are beneficial. Now, if I've got a client that I'm dealing with, and as much as I want to grow my business, I'm really coming at it from a perspective, I guess, a point of view of being of service for that client. And I think of them as if they were me. What would I want? And I want to get the best return possible. There's a number of things that I want. But I also, as an agent, I also want to make sure that we're growing our revenue as well. So it's like, how can we have this working? We want to grow our relationships and ourselves in the process. We're diversifying our offer to the market. So we're not just doing long-term traditional rentals. We now have the ability to partner with short-term partners and have a relationship which works together, and that's benefiting not only us as an organisation. We're actually personally we're growing and developing too, because we're developing these really great relationships with other companies and organisations like MadeComfy, who are using similar platforms to Guesty and the like, who are basically just connecting everybody. And that's the real possibility that I see in all of this, is connection, fun, freedom, and ease. And ultimately, everybody really wants to enjoy peace of mind. So I want peace of mind of knowing that if I'm going to refer a short-term management partner, they're going to give me the right advice to know this is the right sort of property for their model, because I don't want to introduce a client to them and find out the property doesn't work with occupancy or rentability, or something's not quite working. That has an impact on my peace of mind for sure, our reputation. and a number of factors, but it just doesn't really work for anybody. So it makes sense to ensure that the approach is going to work for everybody. And it's so important when we have a client, we can share that with them, get their advice on what they think the return could be and whether that property location would work. Is it presented well enough? And how we communicate with the client to ensure that if they're going to seriously look at this as an option, they know what to expect in terms of the times, in terms of there could be a 1 or 2 month period, like Daryl was saying before, where you're waiting for reviews to come in to create more confidence for bookings to come, because people are making these decisions on the back of a computer or phone screen, and looking at a map and a few photos. So there's so many other psychological elements that are really important in short-term rentals than there are in the normal traditional long-term rentals. So the opportunity is really been alignment. So I can't stress this enough. It really must work for everybody, and delivering an amazing customer experience for the person who's looking to book as well. As Daryl was sharing before and Yoav at the start, there's so many moving parts to a short-term management business. It's easy to think, oh, we've got long-term rentals sorted. We'll just open up a division of short-term, and that's like having a hotel on wheels almost, where it's spread out over such a vast geographical area. I mean, it'd be hard enough managing a hotel where you got 300 rooms in one location. Imagine handling 300 or 1,000 rooms or more over a vast geographic area. It's amazing what systems that need to be in place to make sure that those tenants are happy, the occupants going in and the guests are satisfied, leaving beautiful reviews, 5-star reviews with excellent ratings. And obviously that all has an impact on the rentability of the property and the satisfaction and peace of mind of the landlord, and obviously us as referral partners as well. So I touched on this a minute ago. Yeah, we definitely had a I'm a bit ahead of myself here, I think, in the slides, but we looked at it. We said, are we going to do this ourselves? And I guess in a general sense, at first when you think about something, you think, oh, that'll be pretty easy. I'll be able to handle that. And when you really start digging into it, like Daryl said, around customer support, service, cleaning, bookings, making sure the prices are adjusted based on different times of year and events and all this sort of thing, that's just not a laneway that we want to get in. We want to specialize in what we're good at, which is the traditional property management and sales side of things. And we want to really partner and look for a partner who can take care of the properties, where it's going to be a win for our as I said, our landlords and our clients and everybody involved. I guess I'm looking at our way of being as well, and it's so easy to focus on what we're doing all the time or what we're going to get. And in terms of how we're being, I think this is really important, because how we come at a client, we're not coming to our clients as if, what are we going to get out of this and what do we got to do to get business? We really are bringing, I guess, generosity is a big part of it. We're not thinking limited. We're not thinking that there's a lack of or not enough scarcity. We're actually thinking in abundance. So in terms of our being, we're being abundant in our approach of our thinking, and seeing that there's a way to share and work with other people and other organizations and really have it genuinely work for everybody. That there doesn't have to be somebody that's losing out in this. And if it's done correctly, and if our way of approaching our business and our advice is focused in the foundation of how we're being, I've found that to be a great recipe for long-term enjoyable relationships. And COVID's a bit of a left of center, left of field sort of an event, but what we've noticed by having great partnerships and working closely together, we've been able to balance that really well, and it's working for everybody, and our landlords are still getting revenue coming in. So it's been excellent in that respect. Workability, I focus on this a lot, because there's so many different elements to think about and look at, like strata. That's another thing that's come up over time. We've had strata managers start to block us, or buildings that, even though legally it might be okay to do short-term rental, if there's a bit of a a noise in the background about people not being okay with it, that can come to the forefront quite fast. And nobody really wants to go investing the money to start in the short-term market to find out that, that there's already a movement around not being appropriate in the building. So checking with strata, understanding what's going on there, makes sense to do up front. Ensuring the landlord's on knows if there's anything they've been told about or informed about the short terms being appropriate, or if there's many other people doing it. Obviously, that's a great sign. If there's a few other people doing it, that's good. The occupants are well screened by the short-term management company, and it really works for our partners, everybody. That's the staff, it's the different organisations. It's absolutely looking at every different stakeholder in any transaction and making sure it works for them. Instead of thinking we can just go in and go, okay, look, by law we can do something. Let's just try and steamroll this through. In the long run, that's just not really going to work, because what can happen is even occupants in the building can make it difficult for guests checking in and checking out, and that just can get in the way. So it just makes sense. Again, I'm just going to bring this back to, you don't have to work all this out if you find the right partners. And when you find the right partners that you can trust and count on, they actually work in the similar way, and the way they're being with you is the same. They're not going to say, yeah, just bring this on, not knowing if it can get the return you want. And then, of course, ultimately what that leaves us all with is what we really want is our business is growing and peace of mind. I think that's probably the main thing that we all want in business, and that's what our clients want as well, and it's what the occupants coming into these properties want also.
Thank you very, very much. Josh, let's just go straight kind of to you if you want to share your screen.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So I work with a business called MRI. So we are the world's biggest real estate software company. In this market, many of you would have known the Rockend brand for the best part of 40 years. And MRI acquired Rockend near on 12 months, or just over 12 months ago now. So we come from a perspective of looking after 6,000 clients that predominantly operate in long-term rentals. They also operate in strata businesses and managing those strata plans and things like that. So we come to this with a bit of a different lens, or I guess we have these conversations with our clients regularly, and these evolving business models. And we certainly have quite a number of clients that do, some short-term rentals, a lot of long-term rentals, and obviously the conversation continually swirls around, well, should I go a bit further in rather than just dipping my toe in, so to speak? Daryl and Barry, you guys have got some great businesses there, and I certainly think there's a lot of learnings that the broader property management, long-term property management market could take away. And I take my hat off to you, Barry, for sharing the love, because there's not too many businesses out there that would do that. So just some considerations from a traditionally long-term property management business looking to go into the short term or adding short term to your existing portfolio. And there's a couple of key things that we see and we talk with our clients about. So we look after the software that traditionally manages heavily regulated trust accounts and heavily regulated disclosures and all of those type of things in the property management space, backed with maintenance workflows, and absolutely everything else that sits around the edge. And one of the key things that is remarkably different, particularly in Australia and in the long-term property management world, is that rent rolls are a huge commodity. And we see that we see expansion of big businesses, particularly in markets now. We haven't seen too much, but we expect into 2021 that there will be a number of smaller long-term property management businesses that will be acquired by some of the big players in the market. And some of the things that really need to be considered ultimately, because rent rolls are such a big commodity, there's often debt facilities tied to acquiring these businesses and things like that. And naturally with those debt facilities becomes covenants. And obviously understanding that impact on your property management business's revenue is absolutely key moving forward, because we know that rent rolls are valued on a multiplier of management fees ultimately, with ancillary fees also adding to that multiplier on the dependent market. So understanding what when you go into short-term rentals, what that translates to for your management fees, how it changes the dynamics of your management fees, and then obviously really understanding how that impacts in a positive or a negative way the rent roll asset valuation and any potential impacts there with financiers and debt facilities. Obviously, the positive consideration is always providing opportunity and flexibility to landlords in changing markets, and particularly in coastal areas and inner city areas. Property management, long-term property management businesses have a lot of pressure on fees, churn of property management, landlords moving to and from different agencies. So the ability to provide different flexible options is really an important consideration in any business. And outside of going into a commercial type arrangement or becoming a strata manager, this really provides people a great opportunity in those businesses. And as the guys have alluded to, having the right team in place for success, because we see it often where we have big long-term property management businesses that attempt to dabble in the short-term market with their existing team in place. It is a very different mindset. It is a very different framework, and there is so many different things that happen and moving parts in the short-term business. So really making sure if you're going to go into this, you go in eyes wide open, and you absolutely have the right people on your team to make it successful. Obviously, trust accounting consideration. So as we know, licensed real estate agents of any kind generally operate a trust account, which is heavily bound by the states and territories, which is where our legacy is, or our history is predominantly in this space, dating back 40 years and providing the first trust accounting solution in Australia. But really understanding how you want to structure the financial side of the business from an trust accounting perspective, and whether you would like to continue operating a single trust account, whether you want to look at separating those trust accounts out, what impact that has naturally then on financial reporting for those two different parts of your businesses. And obviously, auditors can absolutely assist with advice in making sure you go down the right road there. And obviously there's software solutions out there that can manage those funds, whether they're long-term, short-term, and all of those type of things. And then just in general, making sure, I can see some of the comments around, the type of lease agreements and, up to 89 days being short-term and then renewing and things like that. Really understanding those differences between the long-term and short-term is absolutely critical in this space. So I guess some of the key takeaways for us is obviously, cost-benefit analysis to improve the profitability. We know that people often try these things, and dip their toe in the water and maybe don't really understand what they're getting into, or haven't done an analysis to really understand where they're headed. And then obviously that idea of creating new opportunities for existing and potential landlords. So, as Barry alluded to, everyone ultimately is here to grow their business and make those businesses commercially viable and all of those type of things, and hopefully one day exit the business with a nice handy paycheck. So really it is a great opportunity for long-term property managers looking to increase revenue and market share and growth, and really offering flexibility. And then lastly, just making sure you have the right processes in place. I look after the top customers for our residential property management products here. And there's things that Daryl and Barry have spoken about today that, through my many years of looking after these big businesses, I would never have considered. I'm sure they would never have considered. So really making sure you have the right processes in place is absolutely critical.
Thank you very much, Josh. Thank you for that. First of all, I apologize that kind of we are going now beyond time. So sorry for that, but we do have a few good questions that some of the attendees asking that are very similar to the question that we prepared for the panel. So what I'll do, I'll combine both. So if I can get a bit more of your lunchtime of the attendees. That will be much appreciated. So I'll start with you, Daryl, with the questions about kind of we had a question here about residential tenancy agreement for short-term rental, specifically for short-term rental, which we also have kind of we also wanted to ask something similar in that. Short-term rentals are not regulated by fair trading in Australia, and as thus. Also can't use normal lease agreements or insurance policies. So how then can real estate professionals be responsible for safety, for safely rent out properties for the short term?
Yeah, thanks, Yoav. So that's a really interesting area, and we obviously get a lot of questions here at MadeComfy about that. So every state, again, has different legislation on how they work and different legislation around short-term rentals. But as a general rule of thumb in terms of leases, anything over 3 months would need to be signed as a residential lease agreement. So anything less than 90 nights would be falling into that short-term rental space where they're booking on a platform and staying as a guest. We also highly recommend that every landlord and every owner ensures that they have short-term rental insurance. So just like a long-term landlord would have a policy in place, short-term rental providers like share cover, Terry share, rent cover, a few of those have specialist policies based on the length of stay and obviously based on the size and type of property, whether it's strata building or freestanding property, where they actually do offer rental insurance specific for short-term clients and guests.
Okay, thank you. A question for Josh now that also kind of related kind of to that. So a lot of discussion about the legislation of short-term rentals across Australia. What should, that's from a different angle, what should real estate professionals consider when pivoting to short-term?
Yeah, I think much like long-term, short-term, long-term, when you're going from long-term to short-term, you've really got to understand the legislation and the field you're playing on. Make sure, you're aware of the impact of strata bylaws in particular buildings have on, rather than it being a long-term property that you may be turning into a short-term property. I guess making those informed decisions and having informed conversations before you make that change is absolutely critical. And I think that, people talk about the regulation of short-term rentals. I think it's a bit of a hyper thing because long-term rentals are absolutely no different. They're both such heavily regulated markets. I guess that, and I think Daryl had this point in his last slide, that the current affairs of the world and the media have just drawn so much more attention to short-term rentals because of the odd party house that has made its headline in the media. I don't think there's too much difference between the two, and to ensure you're totally informed with what you're doing, like Barry alluded to in his conversation as well.
Yeah. Okay. And just kind of while you're on screen, another question, one last question for you. How can, or what is it? I mentioned that we see at our end the trend of what we call flexible rental or flexible inventory, moving from long-term to short-term, doing this movement. So what does it what does it mean from an accounting perspective?
Yeah, I think from an accounting perspective, it's obviously with trust accounting, trust money is trust money, debits are debits, and credits are credits. However, I guess having a platform that can ensure that you can collect your fees as an agency with ease, without too much manual intervention, and once again, making sure that you are compliant and that your auditor is comfortable with the way you've structured your business. We see very regularly that businesses that do short-term and long-term really make a very clear separation between the two trust accounts from an auditing perspective, which also often makes it easier to manage from an operational perspective as well, despite the fact that it is very similar, but it's just a bit more of a delineation between the two, and keeping things a little bit cleaner and tidier, and ultimately making sure that whatever software you're using for receiving trust money and managing trust money and dispersing it is naturally compliant with the relevant state body that you operate in.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for the participant in the event. A question for Barry. Couple of questions for Barry. So first of all, with the oversupply that we hear about of long-term rentals that causing to reduction or significant reduction in rent, what steps should real estate professional be taking to navigate and thrive in this strong renter market?
Mm-hmm. Great question, Yoav. I think there's a combination of things that we're seeing is that there's been a shift. The properties that are sitting around are either not renovated and haven't been taken care of in quite some time in Sydney. So there's a lot of aged properties that right now, because of the oversupply coming in, that's an area that really needs attention. And that's giving landlords and owners two ways to look at it, going, are we going to sell this property, or are we going to invest some money in doing it up and having it ready? And the other thing is having straight conversations with the landlords about where the prices are at, because the prices have come down in the long-term market. And I know this has been different from what some of you guys have been sharing about the short-term stuff, especially in the regional areas. People are traveling regionally, and those prices are getting stronger by what you were sharing earlier, Yoav. On a nightly basis. So, but for long-term rentals, they have been coming down, some greater than others, but being direct and straight with the clients about where they're at, and knowing where they have to do some work to it to bring it up to par, to be attractive to people to come and live there.
Thank you. A question about specifically about COVID. How are the COVID clauses that starts to appear or that appear now in many contracts impacting the rent?
That's interesting. I must admit I haven't seen too many of them. I know there's been a bit of talk about it, but I think it may be still a little bit too early to tell exactly how that's going to play out. I know some companies, some companies have been operating on a very low management fee basis, and as a result haven't been able to afford the staff and the resources to deal with each property on a case-by-case basis. So as people get impacted due to COVID, whether it's around work circumstances or what have you, what I'm noticing is that the cheaper players in the market have had to do blanket decisions for all of their properties, because they just don't have the ability to speak one-on-one with landlords and tenants and understand what the real situation is of each tenant. So it's created a lot more work for a traditional real estate agency, and it actually can be very costly to a landlord if they don't have the right sort of agency with the right team, especially with, our teams had to work sometimes around the clock and on weekends just to ensure our landlords are being taken care of and their rents are being held up, and we're not giving away money unnecessarily. And that takes time and it takes care. Okay.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Daryl, with a couple of questions. Barry actually touched in his presentation. He touched a bit about the strata, and I want to ask from how can short-term rentals add value to an apartment building, which relates also to how we deal with strata.
Yes, sure. So there's a few different areas to that question, and it depends, I think, from which perspective you're looking at that. From an investor's perspective, naturally, any asset that you have that can generate a higher rental income or a higher return would increase the value of those assets. So we see quite a few real estate agents reaching out to us when they are actually looking at selling of apartments and getting an idea of what's achievable on the short-term market versus what it's currently achieving on the long-term market. So for an owner, it's definitely very attractive. You can present that as a higher yield asset. From a developer's perspective, again, we're seeing a lot more developers looking at these buildings as a co-living arrangement where they have long-term tenants as normal on certain levels, and then short-term tenants on certain levels, and then owners with a lifestyle kind of choice on other levels. So different areas with access to different areas depending on which rental model people are looking for. And that gives the developer a good split as well between a fixed and a guaranteed return, as well as a more flexible return with a possibility of a higher yield in other areas. And then the third one would be that build-to-rent model, which you touched on earlier. That one we see as the most exciting space and the area where we're the most interested in looking at the midterm stays, where the benefits of having on-site, whether it's amenities, pools, gym, coffee shops, community, flexible workspaces downstairs with living arrangements upstairs. That's the area that we think going forward is going to be the really exciting space in that build-to-rent model.
No, thank you. A couple of questions from the audience, and one is for you because you mentioned it. What product do you recommend for things like noise and CO2?
Okay. So again, we haven't actually finalized on any one product at this point and launched it across all our properties, but we've been trialing a few different softwares and a few different solution providers, which offer various things like the door automation and access into the properties, measuring of noise, CO2 levels, even utilities. That's quite important for some owners to consider. If you're in an area like the Blue Mountains, for instance, where people are really pushing the heaters hard during winter, and then again pushing the ACs during summer, you want to make sure that you can have access to control those type of utilities to turn them on and off as needed.
Yeah, no, very good. Another question from the audience for both of you and Barry, again regarding kind of the legal side of it. That's from the audience, can short-term rentals bond be submitted to fair trading, even though fair trading only consider long-term leases?
Well, we don't. I mean, that's really a question for Daryl. They manage the short term, so we don't handle bonds for short term. And as far as I'm aware, how do you guys, Daryl? Do you take a bond from people, or there's no legal requirement?
If it's anything less than 3 months, we take a bond or hold a reservation deposit, etc., in the platform where it's booked, or if it's direct bookings, holding a bond on those rentals. Anything that's over the 3 month or 90 days, we're still getting tenants to sign residential tenancy agreements. And then if they're putting a month's bond down, those will be lodged. So MadeComfy is licensed real estate agents, and we can lodge bonds for any longer term lease agreement.
Yeah, and pretty much the lowest amount is 3 months that we would see, in the long term place, and then it'll just be a normal bond as usual. Yeah.
Correct.
Cool, thank you. Look, we have a few more questions here from the audience, and what we'll do, we'll answer that individually. We'll also share with the panelists the questions that are more relevant to them, and we'll make sure that you're getting answers. I want to first of all thank you, the panelists. I actually took a lot of notes, and I'm very happy that I have the recording because I'm now smarter, and it's good, so I can speak about more things. So thank you very much to bringing yourself and your experience and brain into it. Thank you very much for all of the attendees for your questions and for spending the time with us. And thanks also to our team here, and especially to Alex. Alex is our marketing manager. She's managing all of those events. So thank you very much. And we'll get back to you with all of the questions. And thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much,
See you
Joav.
later.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Joav. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Guesty.
Thanks, Alex.
Cheers. Bye-bye.